Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. Today we have with us Michael Chase Walker. Michael is a screenwriter, one of those great Hollywood types who's written scores of scripts for many years, actually. Over the last 15 years, he's written many. He's written books on screenwriting, and he's very well known and loved in the industry. Well, following his passion beyond writing is actually to enter the domain of sex, sexuality, and not just ordinary sexuality and sex, but expanded sex and sexuality. For this, he has written a book that is just coming out soon. It's a modern guide to expanded sexuality and understanding its key components and how it can help to actually transform relationship, love, and consciousness, bringing us into a state of utter ecstasy and bliss through redirecting orgasm. Well, that sounds wild. Well, that sounds like the stuff of Tantra. Well, you're right, it is. But in Michael's skillful hands and words, it reaches another level that is nothing short of artful. So we're very glad to have Michael on the show today to speak with us about the discoveries he's made in his own sex life about this. And he'll be speaking with us rather freely and openly about his discoveries and their implications for us all. So, Michael, great to have you.
Pleasure.
Good to have you. So, what is it that first kind of opened this gateway to you in the first place? Were you dissatisfied with your sex life, or was it another level of impetus that occurred inside you?
It was basically a girlfriend who I think I may have been the classic example of the guy with all thumbs, And it was a girlfriend, I think, who was just
She must have been disappointed.
Truthfully, I had reached my, sort of the sexual doldrums. And whereas I was not interested in another long-term relationship, I had come out of a very healthy and wonderful marriage, but it was finished and done. I was raising my son. I wasn't really looking to go into something conventional. And yet, on the other hand, I was bored to tears with my own sexuality and the boredom of going to making a date, going to dinner, going to movie,
the whole social aspect of
and then
that,
and then coming back, and then having sex with the lights out and eyes closed under the covers, and inebriated, and it was just seemed like an endless cycle. And I realized I had done so much inner work on my other aspects of life, in my craftsmanship, in my inner life, and the one thing that was really vacant and left wanting was my sexuality, and it was something I hadn't resolved. Probably because most of the the Eastern practices that I was deeply involved with have a kind of fear and judgment about sex. It was always the left-hand path or celibacy, all of these things, both in the East and the West.
That great joke of the Tibetan Buddhist monk who's found downstairs in the monastery crying and screaming and tearing his hair out, and he disturbs all of the novitiates upstairs, and they come running down and say, "Dear Lama, 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 what could be wrong? Why are you so upset?" He said, "I found here in the ancient text, it doesn't say celibate, it says celebrate."
Well, yeah. I mean, my own guru said to me one time, he says, "Why are you having so much problem with the women?" And I said, "I don't know." But
who is this guru?
Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta.
Uh-huh.
And I said, "I don't know, Prabhupada. Ever since I'm 4 years old, I just loved him." He says, "Well, you're 4, you used to run around naked when you're 4. You can't do that any longer." But that was the old, and I hadn't realized yet that there was a very, very repressed, and because it was so traditional in all of the disciplines, I took it for granted and reached middle years when is no longer serving me, and I seem to leave nothing but this, succession of bad relationships.
Well, you and I both know from years of study, you're also a Sanskrit scholar, you've been deeply involved and lived in India. You're very familiar with the ancient Vedic texts, Taoist. You've mentioned also Talmudic. Very interesting to see that this has been in the awareness of the ancient Jewish tradition as well, and other Western teachings and wisdom traditions also. This idea that that thing that is most taboo is actually our greatest potential savior, emancipator.
Exactly.
And of course, it isn't power, really. It's not acquisition as in material possession. It's not money. It's sex. It's that drive underneath and beyond all drives that goads us up and out in the morning, that keeps us awake and alive and engaged in the day. It's such a motive force. And through the work of these ancient understandings and something that you're further now promulgating and articulating, it opens a major portal for our transformation. That is the magic of the work that you're doing, and of course that is embodied in Tantra. So give us some tools, if you would, Michael, that could help to steer us in this direction. And what is the basic premise of what you're doing and kind of releasing, if you will, to the world?
Well, I think it's, it in many ways, and what differentiates what I'm speaking about than, say, most of the schools that exist either in the Neo-Tantra or even in the ancient Eastern traditions, is that I wanted to take it out of the casuistry, moralism of the Hindus, the religious aspects of it, and I think that
you wanted to strip it down from the embellishments and cultural imprisonment, if you will.
Well, yeah, it's like Eastern or Tantra or sacred sex. All of these names get attributed to it. And really what I'm talking about, whatever it is, whether it's screenwriting or the fantasy or imagination or storytelling or is consciousness. Consciousness. For me, that is a whole other dimension. And so if you start to look at the way that sexuality can expand consciousness, then you start to enter into it. It's a very, in many ways, expanded consciousness is not a spiritual choice. It's a physical one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it starts, is that each and every human being is responsible for the optimization of their nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And once that optimization starts taking place on a very practical and very real basis, it's something, with all the moving parts that are a part of your existence, you have a responsibility to optimize, to keep the spinal column fluid and the brain and neck exercise. You have a responsibility to tune the brain into the 7 major centers of the body. The sexual chakra, if you will.
Otherwise, it's like having a treasure house, but only finding one tiny little nugget of semi-gold at the bottom.
Yeah.
and ignoring the rest.
Colin Wilson, I think, gave one of the most apt analogies when he said, human consciousness is like a vast cathedral. Only few of us will ever get out of the confessional.
Right.
And indeed, we live in these sort of circumspect lives where our perception is, where flight or fight is the only expression of
We're
existence.
using the reptilian brain 95% of a given day.
Exactly.
What do you expect?
Exactly.
We have a world that looks the way we do instead of, just flourishing in ecstasy and bliss the way it should be.
Exactly. And so it is, it's accessing that other 95%, which is the cathedral.
Yeah.
And so what the, what expanded sexuality is about is literally using the tremendous consciousness of sexuality, the tremendous energy, intelligence that springs from sexuality, and learning how to actually promote it throughout the entire body, literally to prolong, sustain, and maintain an orgasm that normally we experience for about 5 seconds or so. But what if you could sustain that for minutes, hours, days, weeks, which is actually physically possible to do. And doing these techniques, you learn actually how to do it. Then posits the question, what happens to a nervous system that experiences states of prolonged orgasmic intensity? It expands, the heart opens. It revives the intelligence, consciousness, awareness, love, all of these things that we attribute to some kind of moralistic attitude are actually byproducts of an expanded or evolved nervous system.
That's a very beautiful point and a salient point, that what we refer to as morality, usually oppressive because it's originating from the outside in, is actually something that is born organically from one's life experience, which is largely rendered through the nervous system. It's our electrical connection, our antennae to the universe. And when you nourish that, our heart and all the other centers get nourished and bring forth, like you were saying in the radio show earlier so beautifully, love thy neighbor or love thy brother, takes on a whole different resonance because it's born out of a feeling, a knowing, distinct from, now love your neighbor,
very
as
different.
An admonishment.
Exactly. It's the difference between not just love your neighbor as an edict, but to actually become love. And that's a physical choice. That's what's powerful about it. It's very different from the ideas of original sin that sprung from the Judeo-Christian Islamic moralistic schools, even the Hindu to that degree.
Truly enough.
Or even the Buddhist. They can all be very bodily mortified.
It's a human typology, that gets expressed in these religious texts.
Yes.
Do you know, it's not like a religion. Religion has a purchase on a particular morality. It's just the way human beings interact with each other. And I would like to get into some of the particulars, which is an advanced level of your teaching. Because as we discussed also in the radio show, and I really would recommend that people tune into that because it is on archive at www.prncom.net. And there you will hear what was a very animated and lively dialogue between Michael and myself about the subject, and we'll fill in some of the stuff that we're moving into another domain from, into kind of another echelon, because there's so much wealth that you're bringing forward. I want to cover as much as we can in the time that we have together. In short, to just sum this up, Michael, it would be fair to say that a lot of what you are putting forth can be found somewhat fundamentally in the Taoist texts, at least. In that, the idea of retaining semen and redirecting the power of it and the power of the orgasm up the spine into the brain is a fundamental tenet of what you're teaching.
Although I would differentiate it from this, and you
Please.
use the term retaining semen, I'm more interested in differentiating between orgasm and ejaculation. This is the distinction that I make. Not too many people do.
Right.
The Eastern Taoist schools say retain the semen. The Neo-Tantra, California, Hawaiian hippie schools, all go delay the ejaculate. Some say withhold the ejaculate, but they never really give you a context with why that's happening.
An
And
understanding.
I'm there to say that beyond the minuscule or brief refractory period of the orgasm, ejaculatory orgasm, what I teach is how to literally differentiate between the two so that you retain the orgasm and the climax, but none of the ejaculation. And then you're learning how to prolong and sustain and maintain that. So you're literally having hundreds of orgasms within the course of minutes. And you're learning then to bring that to the spinal column. It shoots up. It's
like a vortex.
It is. It hits the
spiraling
cerebrospinal fluid. It races up the spine, And then you bring it up and push it to the neck, and the brain has an orgasm. And so herein you start to learn the mysteries of the jewel and the lotus, that they're really talking about this yogic transference from genital sex to higher sex, where the spinal column becomes the lingam and the brain becomes the yoni. And so that in this confluence of male-female energy exchanging, you are achieving ultra states of orgasmic consciousness. What happens to a nervous system that does this, that sustains prolonged, what we used to call mystics, ecstatics? And it literally changes your perceptions, your view, your intelligence. It gives you really start to see the evolved male and female come into their bodies through these practices.
And have you seen it also reach the heart chakra and open the heart so that the two are more interconnected?
Everything is employed. Some refer to it as all chakra, because
the all chakra'd orgasm.
Yeah, because none of this is possible without freeing up the Muladhara, the base chakra, which is through anal. It's you're literally learning to move those energies up. You're employing a great many of those energies in the release of Kundalini. With the sex chakra, you're exercising the pubic coccygeal muscle, getting it very, very, very tight so that it is used to promote and pump up energy. The stomach chakras, all of the chakras come into the process of creating what I like to call amatory consciousness.
Love consciousness?
It's love
amatory?
Consciousness. Amatory, yeah. It's a consciousness of sexuality and not just an act or a socialized experience. That's what we're talking about.
Well, it's sex as a spiritual practice, using the joy of the erotic, the power of the attraction between male and female that arouses us so deeply, and rather than spewing it out so-called horizontally, outwardly, projecting, we're instead going inward with it and vertical. It's an entirely different, it's a right angle, if you will, going up and through that stimulating Kundalini, so it does what you're saying, and nourishes the brain and, as you say, the nervous system. That's and all the chakras, all chakra'd.
The whole body is just radiating with genius.
I can't wait.
It's accessing the 95% of the brain that we don't, that you were discussing earlier. The human brain, the limbic brain, that beyond. So it's literally moving beyond your biology to access this higher intelligence within. And then you have to say, who you learned literally to make love like a genius. With all of it, your intuitive skills, your intuitive powers just become amplified beyond psychic experience. I mean, it is so profound that when the two of you come together, you're not learning positions. You're not, reading from a manual, in some kind of tantric twister. What happens is the spontaneous choreography of love and genius, of consciousness and pure pleasure that is pulsating throughout both of your bodies. And for that time being, you are in that state when you look into your lover's eyes and you see the most beautiful human being on the planet. And they are likewise seeing that in you. What's happened there? Your consciousness is expanded, changed. Your heart is opened.
You said something, absolutely, so beautifully put. You said something also in the radio show regarding the descending of the gods.
Yes.
That when the nervous system becomes so nourished through the intensity of orgasm, separated from ejaculate, moving up the spine in Kundalini fashion, nourishing each chakra along the way, and when it reaches the crown, and well, in the Taoist way, we always talk about the spill over and spill through down around, forming the microcosmic orbit, so it just keeps on continually. But including that, you have what? What did you say? This is so beautiful.
You've turned the body into an orgasm delivery system, I like to say. And then what happens is
Yeah.
when that higher brain is accessed, in the mystery schools, it's called the HGA, which is their references to the inner genius within the brain. It's referred to as the holy guardian angel.
Uh-huh.
And that when that upper brain is accessed, it's said that the two lovers, angels, incarnate in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no longer the mortals, but the actual these two magnificent geniuses making love to one another.
Divine with the divine.
And you can see it. I mean, you see it clearly. It's palpable. And in seminars where I've taught this, where there's a group of people around, the consciousness is so thick and so palpable that you realize that you are fooling with the resources and fundamentals of such a genius of consciousness that it surpasses belief system and dogma.
When I first took mescaline at a very early age, one of my first primal insights through it was this animal nature, and that this animal nature was completely in unison with the so-called outer nature. And this dialogue, and what we've been speaking about since we've spent time together, is this idea of transcending biology, enjoying biology, God knows, but also transcending it, both in domain of sex, also in the domain of food. All those things that we think are so needed are not perhaps so needed. I mean, after all, it's in the Kriya Yoga tradition that some of the gurus stopped breathing. They were pulseless. They did not even breathe air anymore, and they were on the ground for many, many months. So we see, and then came back out like, that was great. And so in reality, we have these precedents of doing inversions of biology completely. Fasting is one, what I just described with the breathing and the use of oxygen, another, and now sex, the great motivator of all, and inverting that the way you're describing. This is utterly fascinating. It's like stepping outside the survival programs that we've been taught about what it is we need and going beyond into the realm of the angelic and the divine, while still maintaining the enjoyment of a physical, biological body.
Well, I mean, I think it's you were listing the four propensities: eating, sleeping, mating, defending, moving beyond the biologies. There's a wonderful analogy. I mean, Buddhism teaches about achieving the original mind. What happens in these altered states of expanded consciousness? The ego dissolves. It's only you notice like in mammals, whenever they're in fear, their breathing becomes truncated. They arrest their breathing. Whatever,
exactly.
And
staccato.
So we realize that restricted breathing is a function of fear and consciousness. When you learn to breathe, and then you're breathing more throughout your sexuality, you are creating consciousness. You are creating a place for that genius to live full time.
Yeah.
So you have less need of the belief systems. We have that spot in our blind spot in our peripheral vision, where we stop seeing.
Yeah, exactly. Now, one of the things that distinguishes what you're doing from the tantric practices of old and new, the way you've been describing, and Taoist practices for that matter as well, is the use of a device that helps men to separate the ejaculate from the orgasm. Could you go into that a little bit?
Well, what it does is
because it's pretty wild.
It separates the men from the boys. I'll tell you.
Do tell.
And I have to say, it was intimidating enough when I first learned about it. It's mentioned in the Kama Sutra, and it's an ancient practice of Sahajoli, it's called, or Vajroli methods. And what the basic idea is that in male sexuality, there is a right around the $1 million spot that Montauk Chia talks about, right at the point where the vas deferens enters into the urethra, where sperm enters into the urethra, comes out of the testicles and goes into it. there's a clitoral buildup of nerves, clitoral-like buildup of nerves inside the male penis.
Mm-hmm.
And by the use of, now in the ancient days, they used to use bamboo or copper even, and run it down through the opening in the lingam, down the urethra, to desensitize that area.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where the key point is made. You can apply pressure there or whatever. But this is a very advanced, very accelerated, and can be, I suppose, very dangerous thing. My
Certainly invasive.
My urologist is not pleased that I do. But what happens is, it's considered surgery because it is invasive. So what happens, though, is that delaying the ejaculate, withholding the ejaculate, all of the things that even Montauk Chia teaches, or even the Neo-Tantra schools really are unclear about.
The Muirs.
Yeah.
Et al.
There is a point so profound when you desensitize those nerves that you can go to the point of no return and never spill over into the ejaculate. So what happens is you teach your body to go have all of the experience of the orgasm, but you don't ejaculate. And then you find out that you can do that again. With every thrust, you are orgasming. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. And what's really happening is you have taught your body to match the prolific nature of the female orgasm. You brought your body up to meet hers.
Square.
And you're both
cubed.
Orgasming together. And it's called tantric fire. And that creates a huge expanded state, an altered state of.
This is horrible because this is going to be a form of coitus interruptus. What a beautiful moment to end on, but I don't really want to end at all. Michael, you're doing beautiful work. I really applaud you.
Thank you.
Keep it up, as they say. Oh, boy. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I am definitely touched upon with the tantric fire titillating my nervous system right now. I hope same with you. Please get in touch with us at www.abetterworld.net. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World, and I'll see you all next week.